So let's just dive into it. An in-person meeting, and no updates yet. Maybe one of these papers, this preprint here, might be accepted soon, so we'll keep an eye out for that. Yeah, and this from last week. We had talked about just some updates. Al's, we met once to talk about the long COVID case reports that now people interested. We're helping out with this. Al will just have to get back to us on some things he was looking up, but this is going, so it's nice. People want to help out. It'll be a nice paper to put out. Okay, but let's just dive into the news. So you might have seen this paper that just came out. Was it a few days ago? Yesterday, it looks like. But some of the anti-vaxxers are hopping on this, but it's not for that. But anyways, basically, the study came out saying, on the top of this cutoff, saying that if you've been previously infected with the recent different strains, it does provide protection for at least 10 months, just as good as the infection as if you were vaccinated. It's pretty robust study they did. Looked at different cohorts, looking at different even mainly looking at BA.1, the Omicron, but they also compiled Alpha and Delta and previous infections over there, and then looked at it from the different vaccines you get. I mean, overall, it says COVID reinfections by 88%. Will cut down for immune, as you might expect, severity of hospitalizations or deaths. And the senior author even says, but this is not saying that you should go out and get infected and get your immunity, because for the unvaccinated folks, this is not you can still have the potential of a high potential if you're not vaccinated, of course, as we all know, either go to the hospital or die, get some severe effects that would impact long COVID issues. But if you have been vaccinated, go to this paper here and this stuff I brought up 2 meetings ago. That talked about if you have been vaccinated and the stability of the BA.5 infection, they talked about can last about 8 months for your immunity. So that's kind of another confirming of how long your immunity lasts. If you've been infected with Omicron, but also when you're vaccinated, it's it seems to boost that effect more, according to this paper. But that's some interesting news there. Interesting paper. Take a look. The links are there. And take a look at that. And I guess some good news from the biotech companies is that Moderna decided, I think they were doing like this, they were a week ago, that you probably read, they're going to do like a 400-fold increase in price in vaccine, but now they did a sudden 180, which is a good 180 turn, and said, okay, now we're going to provide for free for anyone uninsured and uninsured and underinsured people. So, but Pfizer still is saying they're going to raise their prices to this for the vaccine. So, I guess that's some gleaming hope for once after May, when the government shuts the emergency COVID response, that now things will be charged or not free anymore. Moderna said we'll keep doing that for uninsured people or underinsured. This was an interesting study that just came out 2 days ago. This is good for pro-vaccine people, which is all of us, I assume. Which I just thought share this as a plus one paper, in this little article here kind of talked about it. But they did in Sweden, did a pretty large cohort of people, looked at about 8,000 in Stockholm at the Karolinska Institute. They did the study, but they saw that the short-term benefit of the vaccine caused mental health improvement. So they did, they had a bunch of tables, they did a bunch of epidemiological kind of studies and statistics, but overall, this is kind of like the figure that summarizes it. Where this is the 2 doses, 1 dose is, depression, anxiety. You can see is based on the odds ratios there. This side is having less of an impact, you could say. This is unvaccinated, has more impact. But when you ran the stats, you can see here that anxiety for unvaccinated is a lot more. Whether this is due to health-wise of the vaccine, or maybe just because of not anxiety of not getting vaccinated and being concerned of it, you being at risk of going to the hospital, they don't address that point. But either way, there's a short-term benefit that they found, for depressive or anxiety symptoms for people who did receive the vaccine, which was interesting to read. Again, no biology, but just the epidemiological study looking at population and then surveys and things like that. Now, some interesting long COVID. There's actually a lot more long COVID papers that have come out or preprints that I noticed. So this is a study that was published here at the Journal of General Internal Medicine by people at Well Cornell Medicine. They were looking at long COVID impact on racial and ethnic disparities, and and what might be. They chose a New York population since Well Cornell is in New York, but overall, what they saw was that there definitely is a racial ethnic component for long COVID based on their cohort that they looked at. And these are some figures from here, but overall summary of this is a nice little summary of it saying that for African American patients, hospitalizations of COVID-19 was twice as likely or later diagnosed with diabetes, 1.5 times higher than the general population, which was interesting, and chest pains 6 months after. And then Hispanic one, they said, is 1.6 times more likely to develop headaches. Now, again, no biology, but this not sure what biological differences in ethnicities. I'm sure someone here they know that they might be able to comment on that, but there are definitely some patterns there that are different between ethnicities for long COVID outcome. This is a preprint that just came out. Again, it's a preprint, so take it with a grain of salt. But so here they're talking about liver function in patients 20 months after they're infected with long COVID, is that there definitely is some impact, and they're looking at the patient's levels, basically looking at the blood levels and that's how they assess this is a Brazilian group that they assess the damage to the liver based on the standard levels you might get from taking your standard blood exams and looking at the markers in the blood associated with liver damage. And overall, they saw there was increased amount of markers in your blood associated with liver damage in patients who had COVID and long-lasting effects. So I know Rob Schwartz, who's I don't think here, he's probably in the clinic. Maybe he is, but I know he's been looking at liver damage, long COVID, and everything else. So I know that he's mentioned there seems to be some or markers or something histology-wise in the livers of people who have died of other reasons after COVID. They see their liver morphology being changed a little bit or some anomalies there, but maybe this could further explain what's going on. Now, this is interesting. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Well, this is Bill. Typically, high levels of ALT and GGT are associated with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
True. Yeah, it is. Yeah, but in this case, none of these people are alcoholic. So
no, well, non-alcoholic too.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah, that usually that would lead to the cirrhosis and everything like that. Yeah, so it's not a good sign for these patients there. Right? So this is an interesting paper. People maybe people who are scouring for data, transcriptome proteomic data, they might want to go on this preprint and download. Actually, their data is not available here. There's one thing before I get into it. They said the data availability statement is it's not, since the paper is not published yet. The data is not published, but you can email the authors and ask for them to share it. Hopefully they will. But so what they found, they looked at post-COVID syndrome or long COVID, and the one little thing to keep in mind of this is that it's a low N. So that 11 patients who is suffering, long COVID or post-exertional malaise or infection after that. So. And they only had 2 independent historical controls for the muscle. They're taking, muscle basically biopsies and sequencing again the proteomics, and then also did a lot of imaging. So what they saw was, they're looking at, they saw as the title in this abstract, it infers is that there's little immune differences happening through the macrophages, and you can read the abstract here. They talk about altered metabolic pathways, so it kind of relates to the mitochondria too. So this is a figure from the paper. Again, it's a preprint, so we'll see how much it changes. And again, take the account that there's only 2 independent controls, and then they added another control, which I'll go into in a second, about people who actually have like muscle disorder. And then there's the 11 patients with long COVID. So even though it's low N numbers, I thought it was interesting to look at. Now they're looking at, for example, this type 2B fiber atrophy is their other control they looked at that's not long COVID related, so things that would be related to muscle dysfunction and disorder related to this. and comparing it to the post-COVID patients and then the controls. But then, here they're looking at different markers, immune markers here. The CD169 marker is a macrophage marker, which is here. CD68, I forget what marker that's for. If someone knows. Maybe it's a macrophage marker again. So again, I skimmed through this paper, so. But they're looking at, here's the post-COVID, here's the control, and this is the actual, type 2B fiber atrophy in the muscle. But you see, here's the post-COVID, you see a lot more macrophage infiltration in the muscles, as opposed to your control or this other atrophy of the muscle. It was interesting to see. Now here's some interesting parts. I thought I'll go over the proteomic data. So they got actually good omics data if you want to download it, and we as a group we could probably analyze this data set too. But so this group here is comparing post-COVID compared to the control. The HDC is up here, the healthy disease control post-COVID, and 2B is a type 2B atrophy control cohort. And this middle column is comparing, post-COVID versus the one that does has the atrophy in the muscles. And then the last column is comparing the atrophy versus your control. So you're basically the disease that we know occurs with this is the control. So the interesting columns are probably the first one and this middle one, which the middle one you can see is a lot more similar, a lot less changes as the size of the dots you see. And of course, if it's red, it's up, blue is down. But some things that pop up here, I'm sure the mitochondrial folks, I don't see Doug's not here, but other folks in the group, like you can see, it's like mitochondrial, ND4. There's some mitochondrial genes that we are familiar with that we've talked about pop up here. But there's also a lot of immune things. They focus more on the immune than the metabolic. So it's interesting to see. Yes, Steve, go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
You asked about CD168. And interesting for the inflammation group and everything, this is a hyaluronic acid motility receptor.
Okay.
And of course, increased hyaluronic synthesis, decreased hydrolysis is something we drill on a lot in that. That's interesting. That's what that is, CD168.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know. Okay. So maybe I don't know if you want to reference the preprint in our paper, but it has some interesting applications.
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Yeah, we don't have any muscle tissue though, unfortunately, in our paper. But this is the muscle.
None, but heart, lymph nodes. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And if Doug was here, CMPK1 is here. So Doug's one of Doug's favorite one. And it's interesting to see that it's heavily downregulated post-COVID muscle versus the controls, and then it's more, or is it CP? It's still downregulated compared to this disease state. And then this disease state compared to your controls is downregulated too. So it's further to, but this, with the post-COVID people, it's very highly downregulated compared to the rest in the protein level, which is interest to put the mitochondrial. And also the inflammation story, Steve, for CMPK1, since it's heavily involved. So that's interesting to see here.
Ashton, is that minus log 10 p-value? Are they referring to pH?
No, this is the p-value. This is the FDR. This is actual statistics.
Oh, okay. The statistics. Oh, sorry.
Yep. So, okay. And then, they're looking in this volcano plot, they're just highlighting key proteins that are there. But then this is down here is their functional, looking at different functional things that are, this tree plot is looking at things that are being regulated. And this is the muscle, things that you might expect. This regulates cell adhesion and, ECM and extracellular matrix, things that are being reorganized, so on. This is the transcriptomic data. I mean, again, they didn't, I think if we get the data and do our version of analyzing, we would probably get a lot more out of it than they have. But they're here, they're looking at the lateralis muscle from these patients. And again, the same, post-COVID and all the same groupings. But you can see, you can look down here, find your genes of interest if there's any that pop up. And then these are different groupings of, the clustering of the heat maps visualized. You see B, C, you can read the figure captions here, expressing different kinds of cohort. For example, B is cohorts without the post-COVID 4 to that, and so on and so on. So, but there's some interesting things you could maybe dive into. They also categorize the age on top, see if there's any age difference or sex difference, like female, male. Doesn't seem to be. So that's that paper, but I thought that was an interesting preprint to share. Again, it's a preprint, take it with a grain of salt. But there's data to have, but again, the cohorts are 11 only N of 11 for you that, and N of 2 for your controls. So that you have to be cautious with, I guess. I get through this quick today, but yeah. So this past, so the variant that's pretty prominent now is, as we all know, is XBB.1.5. Doesn't seem like, this dashboard here, at least in the U.S. I should say. I think the rest of the world's about the same. But you can see there's plenty of other variants circulating, but they're very small percentage, and they're not, they basically won't be of concern because, as far as we know, because of the XBB.1.5 has outcompeted everyone else. And the wastewater from the BioBot, I like to use them. It's been going down. The decline is decreasing, but it's still going down. And this regionally, it's the same. I just show one county where I live. I mean, there's been XBB. That 1.5 is the prominent strain, as you see down here. But then, you see that it's pretty much our peak of detection in the wastewater was earlier in January, and now we're pretty much going back down. See if you ever get back down to these levels, that were virtually nothing there, but I don't know. We'll see. And again, in the wastewater nationally in the U.S., you can see that XBB here, this dark purple, pretty much dominant. This is the CDC tracker for the variants, and we can see that, again, XBB.1.5 is pretty much taking over everywhere. As we knew, it started the northeast, east coast, it's pretty dominant, and then now the rest of the nation's following that. Again, there's plenty of other variants out there, but the percentages that are so low, it's not that much of a concern. So what are the trends happening? This is just kind of a little mess of everything, but you can see it's the patterns of everywhere is pretty much going down. Globally, just looking at the more general looking like Europe and Japan, South America, and so on, you can see again the new cases are declining pretty much everywhere. That reflects with the patient ICU and the hospital admissions. The countries and regions that do actually keep track of this is here, and those are in decline, as you can see with South Korea and the U.S. And then new deaths, as reflected by the cases, are also down, so that's good. So this was, if you go individual levels, you see France is, pretty much the cases are gone down to, virtually zero, whether that's because of the lack of testing or not. But I think most places, even Europe and other places, their testings everywhere's winding down. It's actually being, officially reported, like the U.S. will soon in May. But at least the wastewater would be a better reflection of this. But you see here, the U.S. cases and hospitalizations and so on are being down. South America and Brazil, usually Brazil, South American countries follow the Brazil trend. We see those are down, so that's good for them. In Japan, we had their huge spike here, which was of a concern initially, because it caused a lot of deaths happening for their population. But these are all coming back down. You can see the deaths lagging behind the cases, so that's good. But that's it for my updates. Could be quick. I don't know if people have discussion points, but I think that's there's not much other news than this. But if anyone have any questions, concerns, or other topics, otherwise I can give you some time back.